Hello again. I did a tutorial a little while ago talking about the basics of chord construction. We saw how to build some simple three-note chords called triads. When we're talking about the triads, we said they had a formula of 1, 3, 5 or 1, flat 3, 5, so on. But we always talked about the notes kind of in the order that they came from the parent scale. Always the 1, then some kind of third degree, and then some kind of fifth degree. But we don't have to play chords with the notes in that order. I'll show you what I mean. If we think of a C major chord, we've got C, an E, and a G. C major chord. Now that's, the way I'm playing it there is what's called a root position chord, because the root note C, the root, is the lowest note in the chord. But what we could do is say, instead of playing C there, why don't we play C an octave higher? We play it up here. So take that C away, play that one, and we end up with this note, this chord. There's still a C, an E, and a G. So it's still a C major chord. It sounds pretty much the same as that C major chord did. Same sort of major chord feel to it. But in this case, the third degree is actually the lowest note that we're playing. The E's on the bass note. And that's what's called a first inversion chord. First inversion means that the third degree of the chord is the lowest note we'll play. Now, not surprisingly, there's what's called a second inversion, where we take the third degree and make that a bit higher. So instead of playing the E here, we'll play the E here. So instead of playing, we're going to play still a C major chord. C, E and G are the notes in it, so it must be a C major chord. But in this case, the fifth degree of the chord, the 5th degree of G, is the lowest note in the chord, and that's what's called a second inversion. So this, for simple triads, there's 3 ways you can play them: the root position, first inversion, or second inversion. So what does that mean in practice? In practice, what that means is we're not bound that the lowest note of the chord has to be the root note. So it means that we can come up with lots of different shapes and different fingerings for the same type of chord. Now, if you've been playing guitar for a while, you probably know a number of shapes. You might know a C major chord like that, for example. It's quite a common way of playing a C major chord. Only notes in it are C, E and G, but it just happens that E happens to be the lowest note in the chord. So that's actually a first inversion C major chord if you play across all 6 strings. But you'd have to take that shape, and exclusively that's the only way you can play a C major chord. If you've learned bar chords, you might be familiar with a C chord like this, where the C chord is played with the root note on the 5th string, but the lowest note is the 5th degree. Play a chord up here, you might recognise that shape. C is the lowest note there. So that's a root position C chord, but we've got 3 different ways here of playing a C major chord. What that means is, because we've got all these different fingerings available to us for different chord types, means when we're playing the progression, we can kind of keep the progression in roughly the same part of the neck, and it flows much more smoothly. To show you a really common chord progression that you might come across is where you go from from an A minor to a D minor to a G major to a C major. Really common progression, 6, 2, 5, 1 progression. 6th chord of this major scale, 2nd chord of the major scale, 5th chord of the major scale, and up at the root, the 1 chord of the major scale. But if you just play that, up and down the neck, and it's not that easy on the ear, but there's other shapes available beyond just that root position fingering. So what we could do, we can start off with the root position fingering, say for the A minor, but there's a second inversion for the D minor. We can play here in the same similar part of the neck. Then we can go down to the G major within the space of a couple of frets, root position G major, and then go to the second inversion of the C major chord, and that much easier on the ear than going up and down the neck. So that's what inversions are all about. They're about taking the notes of a chord and arranging them in different ways. The chord itself doesn't change because it's still got the same notes in, it's just the order that you're playing them. So it's a useful exercise to sit down. If you've got a copy of PhatPhish, put it into chord, arpeggio mode, and dial in those different chord types so you can see where the notes of the chord are arranged on the neck. And come up with different fingerings. It's a good thing to have with you in your guitar bag, like have a chord dictionary. I've got one of the first things I bought when I started to learn to play guitar many years ago, and it's a useful little reference. It's quite a interesting way sometimes if you want to get out of a rut and you want to be creative. Open up the chord dictionary, just find a chord shape. Maybe it's a chord shape that you don't play as often, and say, well, okay, I'm going to play a G major chord like this. Where might I want to go from here? Rather than just getting locked into always using the same one or two shapes for a particular type of chord. It takes a bit of time because it's shapes that you need to memorise, but the important thing is that you understand the theory behind those shapes and know that no matter whether you're playing a C major chord like that, like that, like that, whatever, you're always playing C, E, G, you're always playing a 1, a 3 and a 5, and that's what makes a major chord. Yeah. So, in case of just taking a bit of time, studying with something like PhatPhish or a chord dictionary, and just building up your chord vocabulary, and taking time to get your fingers used to the different fingerings, and as well as being able to just play the chords as they stand, being able to do transitions between the different shapes and the different fingerings. Because in practice that's what you're going to be doing. You're not going to be just droning away on one chord constantly. You're going to be doing changes between the chords. So again, the changes under your fingers is just as important as actually getting the basic fingerings for the shapes. Okay, so that's a quick overview of the idea of chord inversions. Over to you now to do a bit of study and a bit of practice, and hopefully I'll catch up with you in another video sometime soon. Bye for now.